Welcome back to the Up in the Blue Seats podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Harts. Plenty to discuss today, and things are looking pretty good. As we spoke about on the last episode of the podcast, the Rangers were entering into this heavy-duty stretch facing off against some pretty big-time teams, the Bruins specifically, and they pretty much passed the test with flying colors. So much to talk about, of course. So let's welcome in the rest of the Blue Seats gang. It's from the New York Post. She's back from her planes, trains, and automobile days. It's the New York Rangers beat writer, Miss Mollie Walker. Mollie, glad to have you back. Good to see you. We've also got Hall of Famer from the New York Post as well, the great Larry Brooks. And how could we forget the former Ranger great, Brian Boyle. Everyone, I hope everybody had a great American Thanksgiving, which I need to quickly point out. We had a listener from Canada, which I honest to God did not know that there was such thing as a Canadian Thanksgiving, and I misrepresented Thanksgiving last weekend on the podcast. So to that listener, thank you for tuning in.
Deal with it. Shut up.
I'm acknowledging it, and as a friend of the North, they wished myself a very happy American Thanksgiving. So I hope
Thanksgiving.
I tried to ask Mika Zibanejad about the team having Thanksgiving together on the road, and Chris Kreider was like, Swedes don't celebrate Thanksgiving. They're thankful 365 days a year.
Wow. Yeah. Plenty to be thankful for, especially the current Ranger team. We saw last night, they took down the Detroit Red Wings 3-2. And again, the kids are coming back, man. You love to see it. They now have, I believe that was their fifth comeback in the third, or when down in the third period, second most in the NHL. They're second there, but they're first in everything else in terms of standings. First in the Metro, first in the East, first 16-4 and 133 points. Look, I'm not sure where to start here, but we'll start with this. Is the team this good? Is the team the best in the NHL? I know numbers wise it says they are, but from what we're watching, are they the best right now? Mollie, Larry, Brian, who wants to kick it off?
November.
They're a really good team.
Yeah.
There's a long way, there's a long way to go between now and May and June. And I think you see every night positive, constructive qualities from this team. They're very persistent. They work hard. They're not perfect. They don't have a lot of scoring depth, although night after night that proves me wrong. When they're getting more 5-on-5 goals from Jimmy Vesey than anybody else on their team.
Yeah, baby.
Last 7 games. I mean, so listen, they're a very strong team. But again, I'm going to be a little. I'm taking more of a wait and see approach to this, because it's not as if they're a team whose goal is to make the playoffs. It's a team whose goal is to win the Stanley Cup. And so I think you can look at the team through two prisms. What they're doing is admirable. It's consequential, but we still have a long way to go. And a lot can happen between now and June. Different style of play is rewarded in the playoffs. I'm still not sure that they're quite big enough. They quite control the front of the net well enough to win 16 playoff games. But again, it's the final day of November, and I think they've improved from the start of the season till now. So I expect them to improve from now to the end of December, January. I think that's what you want to see. You want to see them continually improve, and I think be a little bit stiffer. I mean, that's what I look for from them.
I'm curious to hear Brian's thoughts on this, because I feel like the outside narrative is that if a team is not in a comfortable playoff position by the Thanksgiving mark, then you're really in trouble for the rest of the season. Do the players look at Thanksgiving like a benchmark, or is it that's just us?
Yeah, that started probably into my career, really, when people started talking about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I think, when you're a team and you believe in and you have certain expectations leading into the season, you throw that out the window, you ignore all that. And you have to understand, like, Like take a team for, like Edmonton, for example, or
Mm.
to a lesser degree, Minnesota. They have different issues, but those teams expect to be pretty good, and hence they fire their coach when they're not. Like that's not on the coach, I don't think, but that's just what it is. Now, the flip side of that is where the Rangers are. You can't, obviously, no one can be comfortable being in a spot. It's not an automatic. You don't, you prepare, you block out that noise the same way, and you try to get better. It's November, and you can only win the games that you're played, like that you've played, but you've put yourself in a great position now. I didn't get to see much of the Buffalo game. From what I heard, it was kind of a meh game,
Yeah.
and I didn't
Very much so.
I was there at the game, and I didn't get to see much because there was a lot of different things going on that I was able to do, which I really enjoyed. I got to see maybe total of a period with Michael Delzato, by the way. Actually, it was great catching up with him.
Yeah, I saw you guys crushing beers. I wanted
for a promotion.
I wanted a better chug out of you, Brian.
No, I'm not chugging, but I thought we were all going to get up
better.
and bang on the glass and get rowdy, and I was
Only you were.
Got up. I know. So then I yelled at Trocheck, and he looked at me like, "What the hell are you doing here, bud?" It was fun. It was really fun to see. But to Larry's point, there was a play on the third goal for Buffalo where it could have been eliminated on the wall, and that was Keandre Miller, who is, obviously factored in last night a couple times, and that's what he can do. But if he throws a little forearm turn body check, that play dies against Buffalo. That's an attitude I think he still needs to develop a little bit more. If he does, like, watch out. But it's different players like that. Obviously, Trouba's going to play like Trouba plays, and I think you just need more physicality from a couple guys on the backside that really could change everything, because then maybe it brings a couple more guys into the fight, and they play hard. They can be a little bit meaner, but they're winning games in November, and that's all they really can do at this point.
The focus on Thanksgiving has followed the 3-point game, because the 3-point game has made it so difficult for teams to make up ground.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an illusion that the 3-point game creates, that everything's tight. You pick up a point for losing a game. But in reality, the teams move like glaciers now. And so if you're 5 points back at Thanksgiving, it looks like, we just have to have a good week and we're back in it. But everybody's picking up points when they lose.
Everybody else has to have a bad week.
Right.
And so that's why there is so much focus on Thanksgiving, because statistically, whatever it is, 90% of the teams that are in a playoff spot on Thanksgiving finish in the playoffs. And so it's just very, very difficult to come from behind. And this is, the luxury the Rangers have earned for themselves off this start. They don't have to focus every day looking over their shoulder, who's catching, who's behind us, or they don't have to look ahead and say, we've got to make up ground here. We've got to make up ground here. They're in a pretty secure position right now. And that allows them, I think, to just go about their business without being concerned about, we're 6 points out. What are we going to do? Like so much of last year, if you remember, their rocky starts, so much of last November, December, January, February was fighting to try and get into a playoff spot. And it takes a lot of energy. And so, they listen, Brian's 100% right. You can only play the teams on your schedule, and you can only win the game that you're faced with. And they have responded, every time. I thought the comeback against Detroit last night was impressive, because I think they'd been a little bit scattered. They were against Buffalo. There was a lot of East-West in that game. They were giving up a lot on the counter against a very talented Buffalo team. They're going to be really good. If they get strong goaltending, the Sabres are going to be a very, very difficult team to beat. And even as poorly as the Rangers played in Monday night's game against Buffalo, it took the best goaltending game against them to beat them that night. And then last night against Detroit, I thought they were a little bit scattered too. I thought there was, again, trying to make a little bit too much east-west. They were giving up a lot of good ice on the counterattack. I thought Igor had an outstanding game last night. But they were able to coalesce. They were able to play their best hockey in the third period. And it's another very good sign for this team.
The Blues were in last place in January when they won,
Yeah.
weren't
They're the
they?
exception to the rule.
Yeah.
The crazy part about that is to Larry's point, the amount of teams that if you have to jump 4 or 5 teams, that's what's crazy.
Yeah.
Because, and that's why it doesn't work. Even if you do go on a run, you could win 3 games in a week and lose ground because the other team wins 4. Like it is crazy. I just think you look back at what they've been able to withstand with the injuries, and you got 13 points. Is it 6-0-1 still, Quickie?
Yep.
Yeah.
You got 13 points from your backup goalie.
Yeah.
And what that provides now is that luxury to keep your ace in the hole absolutely prepared. And some teams who have to grind through and get into a playoff spot February, March, beginning of April are playing a certain way for a couple months, and they're going to continue that. So there's a lot to be debated, I guess, saying if you're comfortably in, do you have a luxury to tinker a little bit? Do you not want to mess up the mojo? It's a great narrative to have around this team right now because of where they are. It's we can pick apart that like New York fans will do.
Well, that was quickly, that was the thing that Larry mentioned last week when I asked you. I said, this is a tough stretch coming up with all these games in a row, coming off of that little mini bye week. And I asked you, Larry, I said, what would a successful, week ahead be from the next time we speak? And what did you say? You said, don't lose the next 3 out of 4. Well, guess what? They didn't. They beat the Penguins. They beat the Flyers. They beat the Bruins. This team has a sense of confidence now, which is what you want to see, especially under a new head coach. Obviously, he's experienced, but this is what you want to see out of this team coming off of the bad playoff performance last year with the Devils. But speaking on their confidence, they're getting guys back. Unfortunately, they're losing guys. They got back arguably one of their more important pieces in Adam Fox, who logged a ton of minutes last night coming off of injury, which I was a little surprised about, which I'm kind of curious if you guys are surprised. I believe he was 21 minutes and change. But they also did lose Kapokako to LTIR, and then Filipino also was popped on the LTIR as well, retroactive to November 3rd. Mollie, do you sense that even though this team keeps getting hit with these injuries, that the confidence isn't waning, that they are still feeling pretty good, like the best team in hockey would say they are?
I feel like they share the same mentality that Brian was just talking about, which obviously makes sense. But, after the Bruins game, which was the biggest win of the season, probably.
Yeah.
Nobody was reflecting on the success they've had so far. Nobody was looking at it as a statement victory. And I think that's just a testament to how they've played the entire season thus far, that a big game against a big time opponent like Boston, they treated it like just another game on the schedule, just, came in, did their job, moving on to the next, because it is November and they are just trying to stack as many wins as humanly possible at this point in time. But, like we've mentioned, the fact that they have been able to do it 10 games without Adam Fox, whatever the record was, 7-2-1, I think, over that stretch, is so impressive. Without Filipino, who was their second line center when he went down, just really a testament to the depth, 100%. I mean, Louis Domingue coming in and putting up a W for them. They look like a deep team right now.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign for November.
Well, it's interesting too, because you can point to, I think, a number of different players we could point to as most valuable player. I mean, Panarin's play has been another level, but I think you could also call Vincent Trocheck right now their MVP. The way he has stepped in, for Hedel and made that second line even better.
Yeah.
Plus his face-off, his work in the dot is just a revelation. For a Rangers team that has been struggling on draws for 20 years. And he wins
whoa,
one
whoa.
after another, except for that stretch. Except for that stretch, I'm sorry.
I didn't do a lot, but come on.
Come on.
Give credit where it's due.
Well, you played
slightly above average, Larry.
You played left wing, right? You were left wing.
I took the draws.
No,
end of the game, I took
that's
the draw.
been impressive. That's been pretty impressive.
Yeah,
we've talked about it a lot.
The way Trocheck has filled in and his work on the face-off, I think you can look at him and he is exactly now. Now it took an adjustment. Most guys need an adjustment period when they sign as a free agent. And I think there was, last year, the first half, there was the narrative of, well, Ryan Strome is Artemi Panarin center, and you can't replicate that chemistry. And I think there was a lot for Trocheck last year, but when you watch him play now, this is exactly the guy that they wanted. This is exactly the guy they wanted out of Carolina. He plays hard. He's a chippy player. He's aggressive. He's mouthy. A year later, they have gotten exactly what they thought they were going to get in Vincent Trocheck.
He's as advertised. If you look on paper, him and Strome, it almost maybe looked like a lateral move to some people, but having played with Troch and seeing you look at his numbers in Florida, he had 2 broken legs at 2 different times. So everybody remember that. And it is an adjustment coming from Florida, then Carolina, then, now I'm playing in Manhattan. That's different. Mm-hmm. Larry, you said it. He's got that edge. The points might be similar, but he has that edge. He's an underrated skater, in my opinion, and those faceoffs do matter. And he wins the important ones. So he's in a playoff atmosphere. I'd take him because of all those things we just said.
I remember I was shocked when he was traded from Florida to Carolina. I was just shocked. And I don't know if it was a thing with the coach or whatever it was, but it was one of those you looked at it and said, what? Yeah. What am I missing on this one? But again, watching him play in that 7-game series against the Rangers a couple of years ago, you're like, wow. You never want, from a Rangers perspective, you didn't want him to be on the ice.
Yeah.
But he brings a little bit of a different element to this team.
Well, it's something that they're going to need to keep on working with. Quickly before we toss over to Valley and we get into real heavy duty goaltending stuff, because believe me, there's a lot to talk about between Quickie and Igor. I wanted to get you guys' take on Jacob Trouba. And look, Trouba, I think this year he's really coming into his own. It looks like that he's finally really comfortable, or at least that's how it appears to me on the ice, where he's kind of embracing the role as enforcer, and that's what the captain is for the Rangers right now. But Larry, you said it in your article a couple days ago about how the Rangers finally have their villain. And I love that. I do, because it feels like the Rangers have always been kind of, I don't want to say, it's everyone who's just easy to root for. And it's like, I can't stand, this guy. No,
they've been a white collar team for a very long time. There have been some exceptions. The 11-12 team was, which I called, the black and blue shirts.
Yeah.
That was an exception. But generally, this has been a talent-oriented team. You go back to to Amos teams, Rattel, Gilbert. I mean, yes, there was Vic Hadfield, but they were bullied out by the Bruins. They were bullied out by the Flyers, and and Brad Park, said after one of those series, I'd rather lose our way than win their way, which sounded good, and it was good consolation for people in the blue seats back then. But when you win once in 83 years, no, it's not okay.
I don't care how
it's better to win anyway than to lose
possible.
that way. So I think having Trouba, who is it's hilarious to me because he is such a laid back,
Yeah.
Almost kind of
Goofy
goofy
guy.
in the room when you talk to him.
Yeah.
Everything seems to just, flow off his back.
Yeah.
And when you his social media, he's an axe murderer.
Public enemy number one.
He's Lizzie Borden. I don't know. But I do think it's about time that the Rangers have kind of a guy who, in certain instances, you look at and say he's a loose cannon, but everything he does is with a purpose. He everything he does is with a purpose, and he is he gives them a lot of fiber. I think this is the best he's played, the most consistent he's played, and I think it is the most comfortable probably he's been. But remember too, last year not only was his first year of the captaincy, he had a wrist injury early in the season that he dealt with, I think, for months. And so this year it's year 2 of his captaincy, but he's also healthy. And he's playing with K'Andre Miller. They've been a set matched pair since K'Andre Miller came into the league. It's remarkable how the Rangers have been so stable in their top 4 the last few years. It's Fox and Lindgren, and it's Miller and Trouba, and unless there's an injury, that's it. Game after game after game, they send those top 4 out there. So I think Trouba adds an X factor, but he's also so consistent in the way he plays the game hard on essentially every shift.
Hey, Brian, were you offended by the, or I don't want to say offended, but what did you think of the high stick calling that everyone went off?
I can't believe it wasn't a penalty. It was absolutely reckless, and it should have been more than a fine. Sorry, Jacob, but that was out of control. But I'll tell you this: the sequence in Philly, I watch that every day. I think because he has calculated. I mean, that he's got a guy chasing after him who's a tough customer in Delorier, and then he just eliminates Garnett Hathaway. That was incredible. And he is so strong. When he hits you, it hurts. He is so effective that a little more from everyone in that team is, in this generation of hockey, is a feared team in terms of physicality.
Well, he's an artist on and off the ice as well too. Got to check out some of his artwork. Speaking of artists, we're going to have an artist who between the pipes for quite a few times during his NHL career. It's Steve Valiquette. It's coming up next. We're going to talk some goaltending right here on Up in the Blue Seats. Back on the podcast, and it's time to welcome in our special guest for this episode. He spent 5 years behind the pipes for the Rangers. He can do the split still, which is amazing. I love watching him on the pregame, and he can go down, and it's pretty impressive. But you can catch him on the MSG Network, pre post game analyst for the New York Rangers. It's none other than Steve Valiquette. Valley, appreciate you coming on with us. How's everything going?
Oh, great! Like I always say, you can't get up if you can't get down.
There it is. That's a T-shirt right there. That really ought to be a T-shirt. I'm saying merchandising. Look, so we're spending the majority of the episode talking about the Rangers, their hot start, but we specifically waited for you because of your goaltending knowledge to talk about Igor and Quickie. I mean, look, it's not too often where you get a 1A goaltender in Igor Shesterkin, who is arguably one of the best in the league, but now you've incorporated Jonathan Quick, who's semi-found the fountain of youth. Just talk about the breakdown between, I guess, both styles and what each of them are bringing to this team right now. That's really helped the Rangers in their early season first place success.
To start with, analytically, the Rangers do have the best duo in the NHL. Quick and Shesterkin together are ahead of Swayman and Allmark from Boston, but it's close. The one thing with Quick, we'll start with him. He is playing in the blue ice at a place where he's not that familiar over the last few years. Statistically, and to be forthright, full disclosure, I was against the signing before the season began.
Oh, okay. At least you admit it.
No, I do admit it, 100%. And it's hard sometimes, right, Molly? Because you're trying to forecast and look into the past and try and get a glimpse of what you assume is going to happen in the future. The only predictable way to look at things would really be what we've seen happen here is going to probably continue. And it's been 3 years for Quick where he was in the bottom of the bottom third statistically. So I assumed, and of course, in watching the video, that he was playing a little stubborn in the white ice. And the one thing that it's interesting with goaltending is when you're a young goalie, you're playing in a really big adult space. The net behind you is the same size when you're 8 years old as it is when you're playing in the NHL. So when we're young, we come out really far to challenge the angles, and we reach and stretch for all of the saves that we make. And Quick, as great as he's been in his career, the 3 Stanley Cups, winning internationally, he would always say in his interviews, you don't want to play like me, because he felt like it's not great for longevity. He had back issues, groin issues, hips, knees. He had a lot going on because of his style. And I could tell you, he was one of the most amazing goalies to watch during our era with Carey Price and Henrik Lundqvist. Now, the one thing that Benoit Allaire does, the goalie coach that you're very familiar with, he gets older guys to back up a step and move less distance. And back to a young goalie getting into his teenage years where you grow into a bigger size, you learn that you can get away with playing a little deeper. Well, Benoit Allaire does the same thing to a guy that loses a step. When you get to 35, 36, 37, we all lose a step. And when you lose a step, it's safer, but it takes a little more courage to back up into your crease and then still honor the straight on shot, but be able to get across on your feet more. Quick is #1 in save percentage east to west in the NHL right now. How do you explain that? He went from worst to first, all based on positioning. And the last thing I'll leave you with on Quick was, it was bothering me a few games into the season that I was so wrong. And I went and watched his game against Edmonton where he faced 27 shots that night. And I just wanted to see where he was in the crease. 26 out of 27 shots faced in Edmonton, he was in the blue paint. This is a guy that was 50%, and Boiler knows that would have been the scouting report, right? Like he would over challenging. And I remember one night the Rangers played LA at the Garden. It was my only game between the benches. And I saw it at ice level where Strome came down the ice, and Quick would have been challenging that 2-on-1, 4 feet in the white ice. And Panarin was driving back door. Maybe you guys remember the goal, but Strome just passed it off his far pad because he was taking the angle away on the shot so aggressively. And after the game, I was lucky enough to be in the locker room. And I know Stromer from when he was here and I was coaching in Bridgeport. I'm like, Stromer, tell me right now, that was a pass off pads, which doesn't usually happen on 2-on-1s when you get tight, because you know, guys have an ego. They want to shoot to score, or you make the pass across. And he was like, absolutely. I saw him over challenging and I passed there off of his pad inside the dots. So, you know, there's a book on him, but now he's really changed his game to the degree that Allaire's had the influence. I can only assume, based on my experience talking to Marty Biron about it, how he backed him up as well. And Sean Burke, back in the day, he was the first disciple that listened to Allaire, backed up, and then put another 10 years on his career. That he was a great goalie, if you guys remember him from time in Arizona.
Well, sticking with Quick here, I mean, and I'm wearing my UMass sweatshirt because I knew we were going to be having a lot of Jonathan Quick talk, so I needed to represent. But to your point about how he does look different in net, that does seem to be the narrative. But I'm wondering how difficult that really is, playing one way your entire career, basically, and then making such a vast, change in your positioning at 37 years old, this late in your career. How difficult is it for a goalie to make that drastic change?
I can speak to it from personal experience, Molly, because Jason LaBarbera and I were really lucky that Benoit Allaire spent the entire 04-05 lockout with us in Hartford. And
that is luck.
Oh no, seriously. And
yeah,
this is where my love runs deep for Benny. It was so unselfish of him. He didn't have to come. He could have been wherever he wanted to be in the world. But every day before practice, he spent 30 minutes with us. After practice, 45 minutes. But initially it was really interesting because he's looking at me at that time. I was 27 years old. I was a backup goalie in the American League. And he said to me, Vally, if you keep playing here, you'll continue to play there. And then what happened, Molly, was he showed me that I could stop the puck from the blue ice. Because again, if you think about my issue was I was almost too big in my era to play goal. And if I was out in the white ice at full extension, half of my arm was outside the net. Backing up, I was able to use my reflexes a little bit more and also have more time to track the puck after it came off the shooter's stick. So you're buying time and traveling less distance. Allaire got me to buy into it. It's truthfully, it's one of the biggest reasons why player development is at the core of what I love in the game, because it happened to me. I saw it happen to LaBarbera. I saw it happen to Henrik. A lot of people forget Henrik was outside in his first training camp coming over from Frölunda, and then Benny got him to be able to back up and move. And
he took it to another level. He went even farther back because he said he had that split second more time to catch the puck. I'm like, you're out of your mind, dude.
Right, like it takes giant ones to be able to stay back there.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. People always think
giant.
Clanking. And I thought that Hank, he was like, I want to say the second guy that ever tried it, because Felix Potvin tried it, and then it was working for him until it didn't, and then he was almost out of the league because of it. Because that's what we had to deal with. And last thing on depth, and the one thing that has changed and evolved over the years was the crease. So in the early 90s, it was the rectangular crease. So a lot of our coaches that started coaching us, they would always say to us, get to the top of the crease. But by the time the top of the crease had evolved with the arc, you're talking about 4 more feet.
Yeah.
Right.
So there was some misdirection and miscommunication there for a time as well.
Well, look, he is Quickie has been, you got to give him a ton of credit because camp didn't go great, but that's a new system in front of you. And I've been kind of harping on this, and I'd like to get a goalie's perspective. Like they're going after the goalies in Edmonton, and there's shots that they could save. But if there's a predictability to the D zone coverage in front of you, where especially over a little bit of time and definitely over a lot of time, when you have breakdowns as a goalie, do you know where they're going to be? Like, can you anticipate that and you make that great save? Or if it goes in, it goes in, but you kind of have an idea of where it's going to be? Because I'm thinking Edmonton, like, it's chaos in their own end. Like, they don't stop. They don't come back and do the basic things that I teach 8-year-olds right now. And it drives me out of my mind because, what's going on? We're going to fire the coach. These two guys are working so hard. Well, listen, if 97 and 29 don't stop in their D zone, I don't care how many points they get. They're never going to win.
Yeah.
If you're a goalie, I know this is like a long-winded way of saying it. I had to get it off my chest. But if you're a goalie and you have that predictability in front of you, even if there are breakdowns, does that make it easier, or am I just talking like crazy?
No, you know what, Boiler? The neat thing is it ties back to the 04-05 season, because that lockout year, I think you would have been in college at the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Sophomore.
Okay, so the AHL was a great year because every team had a star, all right? Like Camilleri's on one team, Spez is on another team, Eric Stahl's on another team. So every night you're playing the top guys. Our coach on the D side was Nick Fatiu, Ranger legend.
Nice.
I've been in the room, just so you guys know, when Brad Park has talked about him and the older guys, and they will always say Nick Fatiu is smartest hockey guy they know.
Yep.
Nicky, he understood the D zone, where, you know how I started talking about the Royal Road, the line that goes up the ice and stops at the top of the circles? Well, I got that from Nick. He would draw that on the dry erase board every day at practice, okay? And he would have a little, he was funny too, he's hysterical. He would draw a smiley face, and that would be our weak side winger that would come down. And at that time, this was unheard of, where our weak side guy would be what he would call our safety guy. And then when we would collapse on you in the corner and swarm, we would have a switch where it would go from corner to corner. Center would switch with weak side winger. The point of the story is it was always about protecting the puck going from one side of the ice to the other. Nick refused to allow a pass or a player to carry the puck from one side of the ice in our D zone to the other. And the result, Boiler, was we had 11 shutouts between LaBarbera and I. In the AHL, during the best possible year you have statistics, we both finished at the top, and it really propelled us. It was a culmination of time with Allaire and time with Nick Fatiu's D zone that we were able to just go out there and just feel so big, both of us. We talk about it to this day. It's what I really harp on right now with the Rangers. And you'll hear me, the only off-putting comment I have to have on the Rangers right now is just how they have to insulate their goalies better off of those chances off the rush. High danger chances, 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, the east to west off of that. And like last night was a good example. They gave up 5 high danger chances last night off the rush against Detroit. And it all started, and there was actually 5 as well against Quick that went east to west off the rush against Columbus in the November 12th game. Up until that point, the Rangers had the number 2 rush defense in the NHL, and now they're at 32nd over that same time, and they're back to 22nd overall over the full season, which is exactly where they were last year. And you can't play like that. And Mollie, when you and I saw each other at Hank's movie premiere this year, we were talking about it, and this was, I'll paint this picture for my end of the season, right? I get the car service on the way home, have a little glass of scotchy on the way home, the Oban 14, and the season's
classy.
over. No, the season's over, Boiler. And I'm looking at my driver, and we're very good friends. I'm like, Kev, what a waste. What a waste. And I read Mollie's article the next day. And
that's exactly what I said. That was my last line. What a waste.
And that's what I brought up to you when I saw you. I was like, it's so funny because, look, my commute to the city is a lot. The work we put in on the TV side is a lot. I just hated that series. But what I didn't like about it was Igor gives up 14 goals against the Devils in the first round. 7 were off the rush. 7 of the 14. And I saw it all year. I'm like, you guys can't win a Stanley Cup when you're 22nd in this stat. And the last previous 5 Stanley Cup winners have all been top 5 there, defending off the rush. And Boiler, you're going to like this one. The 18 team that was the Tampa Bay Lightning, it was after you had already left there, but they had their best season in 18. They broke all those records. They were having the best record of all time. They were 27th at defending against high danger chances off the rush. And the Columbus Blue Jackets were 9. So it really wasn't an upset the way we thought it was at the time. The one flaw that Tampa Bay team had was they were 27th. The next year when they won, they were 4th. So they went from 27 to 4. Colorado 2 years ago went from 12 to 2. Vegas last year went from 20 to 4 or 5. I have it written down. But the point is teams that defend against those big chances off the rush, they're the ones that are going to win cups. And I want this Ranger team to win badly. I mean, I've been doing this 10 years. I'm not doing it for my health anymore. Like, I want to see it. And they're right there. They're right there. I love the way they play. They've got the guts to do it. They're deep in every position that matters. They have to defend against the rush chances that are the big ones against. Yeah.
You're resonating. You're resonating.
All the time, though. It's like if you don't have the puck anywhere on the ice, you're on defense. Reload and get back. I don't care where you are. You could be behind the opposing team's net. You're on defense. You got to figure out a way to get back, get your body in front of the puck. And it's easy that way. And to goalies, I think they agree when they can predict what's going on. Like Bob had a hard time with it in Florida for a while because it was a fire drill in the D zone for a while. To those guys that have success being aggressive, you look at Quickie when he was playing outside in the white ice. Look at his D. Nothing was going east-west.
Right.
And if it did, you were tackled. Right. Peter Mrazek had a little run in Detroit where Detroit could have taken a penalty 3 times in every shift. You got bear hugged everywhere on the backside. You couldn't get in. There was no trash to pick up on the backside because they would maul you. And the ref's like, I can't call 3 penalties every shift. And they got away with it. And that was
6-on-5. I'm familiar with that. That was the thing where they would just jump you no matter what on the weak side post. Their winger would.
And Kyle Quincy would you have a wrestling match with Quince, who I played with. I'm like, dude, I don't have the puck. And he's like, I have to. We're in the playoffs.
I have to. I just have to.
I remember I pulled his beard once, like during the play. He had this big beard. I'm pulling on his beard to try and get free. But these aggressive goalies, it works for them.
You know what else I think about a lot too, Boiler, is I had this conversation years ago with Adam Oates because of the line of work that he's in, and I'm fascinated with it as well. Yeah. And the one thing he said to me is, you can't give these guys too much to think about it. And as a former player, I'm sure you'd agree when it comes to offense. Yeah. But he said the one thing you can do is give them restrictions. And a restriction for Ovi, he said, when he was in Washington, was he was coming off the rush when we're on the power play, and he consistently was shooting above the top of the circles, like a clear view shot, trying to beat the guy clean off the rush. But he's like, I want to get into our setup and I want to get on the power play. And he's like, I had to just say to him, like, Ovi, no more. Like, you're done with that shot off the rush. It's killing our play. So you can put restrictions in. And last night I thought about this when I saw the Comfer save that Shesterkin had to make. It was 30 seconds into the third period, right? So I've watched so many rush plays over the last 48 hours. My eyes are coming out of my head, right? And I'm talking about, like, one consistent characteristic I'm seeing of success is that when they're coming through the neutral zone, the offensive team, and they have the puck, whether it's in transition or you're coming out of your zone, they get in between the dots in the neutral zone first. And then if they're kicking it outside, they're getting back inside. Or they're coming through the dots in the neutral zone and then staying in that dot lane, because it's, again, harder on the goalie, right? So on this particular entry where it gets turned over and it goes back the other way and Shesterkin makes that huge glove save on Comfer, it was his best high danger save off the rush in the night. But Zibanejad and Lindgren, they crisscrossed at the blue line on the entry. Lindgren got it in, but they entered on the outside. Zibanejad's a righty. He was on the left side of the ice on the half wall perimeter, and he goes backhand through the box, but that starts the turnover. What I'm saying is it's almost like, again, to protect the players against themselves, because I know Mika can make that play. He's a stud, but I don't want you to make it right now when we're down 2-1, 30 seconds into the third period. And look, the game could have been over, guys. Detroit had 3 grade A's off the rush when score was 2-1. It could have been over, because one of those should go in. It's 1 every 3, 1 every 3. And that's what I'm thinking now. It's more about, can I help these guys have restrictions? I'd say to Mika, if you're not entering between the dots through the neutral zone as you get over the offensive blue line and you're on the wall on your backhand, I don't want you going through the middle. Because the first time I saw this was 18 with St. Louis. In the playoffs that year, they'd have a 3-on-2 and they just get it deep. They just like, no, we're gonna hum it down here and we're gonna outwork you guys here and not play with that risk going the other way. Because, by the way, they were 23rd the year before they won, and they were 4th. And you guys remember their story coming back from being before January.
That goes. I mean, that's just giving away things for free. That's making it easy for the other team to generate.
Yep.
And to your point, I've always I've wondered. Excuse me. I've wondered why Jordan Eberle's been so effective all the time. And it's because he gets to the middle of the ice always. I don't know how he does it. He's not particularly fast. He's got great hands and he has a great mind for the game, enough to know to go to the middle of the ice. He's a threat. Someone's either coming to you or they're not. If someone comes to you, especially in an odd man situation, someone's open. If they don't, you're in the middle of the ice.
Yep.
Shoot a puck, whatever. It's going to cause chaos. But he always, if you watch him, he always gets to the middle of the ice. And guys go off to the sides. The only guys that can go off to the sides that are really effective, I got 3 guys. I got Sid, I got Draisaitl, and I have Cooch. I got McDavid too, because he can just blow by everyone. But because they're elite, their backhand is like their forehand. So they still have options. When you go to the boards, when you go to the outside, everyone in the rink knows you got one option. Either you keep it and you're not dangerous, so it'll leave you, or you're going to force something to the other side of the ice or the middle, and they wait for it, they pounce, and away they go. And that's just giving away things for free. So as a coach, you're like, don't let them have anything for free. And you're just giving it to them. You can't do that. If you go to the middle of the ice, now the D has to look both ways. Who's coming? What's going on? So that's a great point. I love that point. Getting to the middle, it's not easy. And it's definitely, it shouldn't be easy when you have number 8 back there, because he's scary. But if every D plays like that, starts throwing their body, like they're going to keep everyone on the outside. And those high danger things might go down just from fear.
It's only what a goalie can handle. Like, back to the goalies in the NHL are giving them up 1 every 3. And over the year, it's gonna be there. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter who your goalie is. It could be Igor or anybody, but he also has capacity at what he can handle, and it becomes too much math off the rush when it's a 2-on-1. Because now you're more susceptible to the shooter, because as a goalie, you're thinking about the potential of the pass. Everything gets compromised, right? Like positioning, if you're a goalie, you need angle, you need depth, you need squareness, and you need mobility. So you have to have those 4 things, and then you can track the thing. But all of those get compromised, and you think about it, it's one of the only times where a goalie has to really backward skate, which you can lose your net that way.
Yeah.
And I found that out when I started working with prep school goalies. I couldn't believe it. You go from the NHL where, of course, I'm watching the other end from Henrik, and I'd be like, the guy's like always in the middle of his net. To you see a prep school goalie, right? The first year I retire Boiler, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy has no idea where his net is, But there's such a difference between prep school, college, pro. And I'm sure you felt it as a shooter, right? Because,
oh my gosh.
Right? Like, it's like all of a sudden you get to the NHL and it's like everybody in the net is big. Everybody's always in the middle of their net. Everybody's hard to beat.
Oh, when they would basically catch it and look for, like, in a drill, you'd go to your first practice.
Yeah.
And I could shoot. Like, I couldn't skate. I could shoot when I was young. I had to change my stick and get better at skating because I realized I'm not getting 40 in this league. When I came up, I could shoot, and I go in and it's just like dink, dink, and they're not even moving. And our goalies weren't particularly good in terms of NHL goalies at the time. I had Barbs in the American League, and he made me humble really quick.
He was nasty. How good was Barbs?
He was good. He sweats when he eats. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Oh, Barbs. I feel like telling a story right now, but you're happy with me. It was a first date story that we were in Hartford together.
Oh, well, now
Yeah,
he's going to let the cat out of the
Was it
bag.
Kodak?
I'm like, Barbs, how are you going on a date with this girl tonight, man? What about the sweat? He's like, I don't know. And I see him the next day, and I'm like, Barbs, how did it go? He's like, I had a teepee of napkins next to me. It felt like there was a bit of, he said it was like lightning going off in his hair. And then
Oh my God.
Hey, like Along Came Polly. When he goes on the date.
Yeah, the Indian food.
The Indian food.
That's exactly what it was like.
But you can't go there. You have IBS.
Iconic. What an iconic scene.
He was a great teammate. He was great to me, by the way.
They're doing
Barb's
a great job right now with Markstrom and Calgary. They've got their stuff back together and they're looking good.
Yeah.
Barb's the goalie coach there. Yeah, he's doing great.
Awesome.
Well, Valley, you and Boiler had a quick overlap in 2009-2010 season. You have any memories playing with Boiler? I did look up, and unfortunately, Brian never supplied you with a goal. So, he really never really helped you out between the pipes. But,
But I remember I was on my last E at that point, right? Because the hockey career is you start with a lot of excitement, and then there's a sense of entitlement in the middle, and then there's the ending. And I was at the end. And I was just trying to hang on. I'd lost a step. I was playing like crap. And that's what I remember about our time. I got sent down. No, I was really struggling. Like, I remember it's harder. It's funny because like it's hard to make the NHL. And then when you get there, it's even harder to stay there.
Yeah.
Which is such a credit to Boiler's career, because I'm very familiar with your story, right, Boiler, where you came in, you had to really muck and grind to get your positioning. And then you got to stay there in that role for, what'd you play, 15 years? It's like, oh my God. And that's why when old guys like us get together, the first thing we respect most about our former teammates is when they get to the 600, 700, 800, 900,000 games. It's like, it's always about the games played. And of course, the winning the championships and stuff. But, amazing career, Boiler. And welcome to the industry that is the social and media world. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a blast. But I remember Valley being like, are they ever going to let him play? Because the goalies back then played 70 games.
Yeah.
The number one guy. So it's like, when is he going to play? How are you going to? It's like every 2.5 weeks he gets tossed out there on a back-to-back.
That's tough.
And I'm like, that's really not a great recipe for
Boiler
guy, but you were
towards that year. Okay, we have a lead before the season. And now keep in mind, this is my 4th year playing 12 games a year. Like, I already know my role better than anybody, right? Like, I already have it mapped out in my head. I'm like, okay, I could probably pull this off for 3 more years, playing once every 2.5 weeks, right? So Torts brings me into the meeting before the season. He goes, Valley, sit down. Just want to let you know what your role is. I'm like, okay. He goes, you're going to play the games that I don't think we can win. And not going well, you're staying in there because I can't risk our starter. And I'm like, thanks, coach.
Wow.
No, but it was the worst thing to say to me because now I'm looking ahead in the schedule. I'm like, oh, we're in Pittsburgh back to back.
I'm getting that one.
We're not going to win here.
Valley, were you in net for the free hat giveaway?
Was that the Pittsburgh game? That was my last game. That was my last game.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So we
Sid had a hat trick on me that
Sid
night.
had a hat trick, and they gave away 10,000 hats before the game. I'm not kidding. There were 10,000 hats on the ice. You couldn't see the ice.
And this is what I remember about that game. We're down 4-0 after the first period. I know I'm not coming out. Like,
Yeah,
I've
that's
already
been
told.
made clear
I've
to
already been
you.
told.
You're taking it.
And this is the part when you know you're getting close to the ending, right? I remember going into the bathroom, looking in the mirror and saying to myself, that was the best I can give these guys right now. That was 4 goals, but that's like I remember the goals being like that good. Malkin coming out of the corner, going across the Royal Road twice. I'm like, that's all I got, boys. I don't know what else left.
It sounds like you handled it very well.
I got scratched that game.
Oh,
I was in doing push-ups.
Oh, so you're one of the guys throwing the hats on the ice.
Me and AV are eating popcorn, and Verleeson has to dress for the game, and he didn't play a shift.
You remember his nickname?
Never listen.
Never listen.
He was the funniest guy. He had the funniest haircut. And I'm like, he comes to the rink one day. He's like, I got a haircut yesterday. And we're like, did you though? Did you get a haircut? He goes, yes, Brian, got a haircut yesterday. I'm like, looks the same. Like, he goes, I go back next week, get another haircut. And I'm like, why are you getting all these haircuts? He goes, Brian, I make $1 million. I think I can afford a haircut. Just got to get my work boots on, go exercise for 1 hour, get my $1 million. Didn't play for like 2 months at the end of the year.
Well, all good things must come to an end, like your career, Valley. So as always, we appreciate you coming on. Thanks for talking goalies, and hopefully we'll have you on later. Be sure everyone to tune in MSG pre and post games to catch Valley on there, giving all the good stuff. Valley, as always, appreciate it, bud. Take care.
My pleasure. Good catching up with you guys.
See you, Valley.
And that'll put a bow on episode 135 of Up in the Blue Seats, our Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Before we get out of here, we got to give out some stars. Molly, star number 1 of the week. Who you got?
I got to go with Jimmy Vesey. I mean, just what a turnaround from the very start of the season for him. And he's the guy that you want on your team always. And I feel like for Jimmy, just what a great story. You know, coming to New York out of college as one of the most coveted free agents, just didn't work out, didn't happen the way that he wanted it to happen. He becomes a journeyman, makes his way back to New York, turns it into an extension, and starts this season as a healthy scratch. And now, as Laviolette said after the Detroit game, he just can't come out of the lineup. And those kind of depth players, and with the attitude that he has, those are the guys that, you know, you win Stanley Cups with. And I just think he's going to be instrumental for the Rangers this season.
Easy peasy, Jimmy V.
Boom.
Backbone right there for it. Love it. Boiler, who's number 2 star of the week?
Molly, that was really well put. I love V's. I'm happy he's done that. I got Trocheck. He's just gonna get more important as the season goes on, because he's the guy that does all the things that you need to do to win when the games get tighter. When I like to refer to it as when the ice shrinks, that's when the playoffs happen. There's a lot less room out there, it seems. I think he's got a ton of offensive ability. He's a north-south guy. He can play really hard. He can blow you up with a hit. But he's got that knack. He has an ability to make plays and at the right times. He's all emotion. He's a lot of heart. But he took 3 minor penalties in Detroit. But I just love what he brings. He's a huge piece right now, especially with some injuries.
We know Trocheck has a number 1 fan here in Brian Boyle.
And I'll tell you, I'm sure a lot of Ranger fans as well too. It wouldn't shock me if, as the season goes on, you see more Trocheck sweaters being worn at the Garden. My number 3 star of the week, it's going to go to number 8 in your programs. He wears C on his chest. It's Jacob Trouba. Trouba Train played in his 700th career game. That's a hell of a milestone, just as Valley was saying. You know, you look back and you talk to veteran players and how many games they played, and he's played in some wars, and he still has a few battles left in him, and he's going to lead the Ranger team to the promised land one day. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see. Anyway, as always, many thanks to Jake Brown for helping produce the show, as well as the intern Mason Verdicchio. You can catch up on all episodes of the podcast by subscribing to Up in the Blue Seats on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching this right now on the New York Post Sports YouTube page, give us a thumbs up right below and comment. How are you feeling about the Rangers? How was your Thanksgiving? How was your American Thanksgiving? Because we've established that.
Stop it.
Let us know. You can also follow us on Twitter X That's at Mollie Walker, 2 E's, 2 R's, Brian, which is Brian Browse 22, and myself at Andrew Harts, no E, just Harts. For Brian Boyle, Larry Brooks, Mollie Walker, and of course, Steve Valiquette, I'm Andrew Harts. We're back next week for another episode of the podcast. Thanks as always for listening and tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week. Later.